I was involved in a car accident. I forget. In October 23rd, 1991 was that day. And then my sister was in the car with me. My sister was in the car with me as I was driving to Birmingham to dance lessons. I suffered in the car accident. I suffered the traumatic brain injury, or TBI, and Alyssa did not. In the hospital, I was in the hospital until March 13, 1992. Okay.
Suffered a traumatic brain injury in her accident. It was termed a closed head injury as there was no opening in the skull. The neurologist explained she had areas of injury in many areas of her brain, just like a shaken baby syndrome, where her brain had knocked up or had been pushed against her inside of her skull. And also it had twisted some inside her head, inside the skull, which caused the brainstem to swell. And then within the first 36 hours she suffered a stroke, which caused paralysis on her right side. And that's pretty much the initial injuries that she was dealing with, but it left her on a ventilator and unconscious.
We didn't get very far. The girls did real well. They're 14 plus.
Look at the ham waving at the camera.
Ham? Did you say ham?
Mm-hmm.
Ham?
I need to know what the date is.
Oh,
It's not on the screen.
come back here. It's this button right here. Is it there?
Yeah, there it is.
The time's there too. Push it again, you got time. The last
Which one was
button.
it?
There you go.
Oh, there it goes. 144, I think that's a little slow.
Well, let's show you. Let's see how well you hear. Jeannie
Oh, no, I
out
killed
that she
her.
needs to go have a hearing test. That girl can hear.
Oh.
No, she's about half of what she ought to be.
I can remember a bunch about the hospital, but the one thing that sticks in my mind is me riding around in my wheelchair and seeing a lot of different people. They were all nice to me, and they all enjoyed seeing me. But I only had to stay on the second floor, I think.
Kara was in intensive care, of course, in the neuro-intensive care unit for several days. I'm thinking at least 10 days, and then they moved her to intermediate care, and from there she was moved to the neuro floor, and she was there about 3 weeks, and then she was moved to the rehab floor, all of this was at St. Francis. And she was semi-conscious in that she seemed aware of some of things that were going on around her, but not understanding everything and not reacting to many things. She was not able to talk. She had a trach in, and she also had a feeding tube into her stomach. She was not ambulatory, so she was for a long time flat on her back or transported on a gurney. Then they did get her up into a wheelchair, but she needed complete assistance getting in and out of that, into bed or any other activities. And I remember it must have been in end of January that she started asking a couple questions, but the way we communicated at that time, she was using the alphabet board and would point to some of the letters of the words, and then she would try to vocalize some, and they did remove the trach, and she was trying to talk a little more, but it was a slowed speech. But I can remember one conversation towards the end of January where she looked out her window, saw a building, which was the medical building over on Pennsylvania Avenue, and she was asking, what building is that? And then she'd ask, where am I? And then she'd, well, I don't remember checking into this place. And I would explain that she'd been in an accident and she'd come in by the Life Flight helicopter. And then within 5 minutes, she started the same routine. What's that building over there? Where am I? I don't remember checking into this place. And I explained. And for a couple days, when she got that idea, she would repeat it several times before she could move on to another train of thought. But then she seemed to remember it after that. And so there were just little pieces starting to come together. And I remember being there on Super Bowl Sunday, and I wrote her a note, and we asked her if she remembered what the Super Bowl was, and she did give us this long, many-worded sentence explaining how it was two teams, one from one league and one from another, and they all came together to play to see who was the best football team in the United States, and we were all just flabbergasted that she could put that whole idea together. And she was in there until March when we brought her home, and then she went into many years of continued outpatient therapy with occupational, physical, and speech therapy continuing.
Is that enough? We need 7. Wait a minute. We need 7 cards, Kara. How many cards do you have? Count them. Count your cards. How many is there? 5. 5 and 2. 5 and 2. Is that how many there are? Can you tell me that? 5. That makes, say it. 7. Can you say it? Let me see. Okay.
Good job.
Good job. All right, my turn top. Ooh, good high five. My turn.
Kara come home from the hospital. She still did her outpatient therapy 3 days a week, but she was also wanting to get back to school. And her accident happened early in her junior year, or October of her junior year. So she had several credits she needed before she could graduate from high school. And balancing therapy and school was pretty difficult, so we didn't try it the first year. It was probably fall of '93 when she started back to school. Her therapy consisted of speech, occupational, physical, and some group therapy to help her with socialization and communication skills. Those days were 3 days out of the week, and she went from about 9 in the morning till 2 or 3 in the afternoon, if she could tolerate that much, but it would wear her out, and she didn't have to stay on that long of a schedule all the time. But then she went back to school, and there was a great difference in her learning abilities on how she learned. We could tell her intelligence was there, but the method of learning and retrieving the information and being able to communicate it, all those areas were affected by her injuries, so she had to take a lot of time to do her homework, and she was learning. She had to do English for 2 years and social studies, and so even though it was only a couple subjects for each semester, it still took her 2 years to finish high school, so she didn't graduate until the spring of 1995.
The changes that occurred that affect us just for me, I think, because all of the classes had to move down to the first floor when they were on the second and third, but and ICC. I like going back to school. Well, yeah, it was kind of hard, but not for me even. But I enjoyed going back because I always kept in mind the end product.
Kara Renee Stevenson.
The physical changes that we had to deal with Kara after her accident were quite, I don't want to say enormous, but quite a lot of difference. She was not able to walk, her balance is affected, so we had to use a wheelchair. She now can use a cane or a handheld walker, wheeled walker we call it, but still her balance is greatly affected and she can easily fall. Her right side was affected, so she has little use of her, functional use of her right arm and hand. Also, her communication skills were altered in that her brain does not process the auditory stimuli as fast as it's received. So we had to learn some kind of communication, and the first was the alphabet board where she could point to each letter. Then we moved on to trying some sign language, like the numbers, and especially because many of the first 10 numbers can be done on one hand, and she only had use of that one hand. But she was not very happy with trying to learn sign language completely, and she was needing more communication skills and faster than what just learning sign language would satisfy her. So we learned cued speech based on the phonics, and that was better for her because she had language still in her brain, and it was more successful at that point for her to use cued speech. And the other part, the big change that we noticed was her emotions and her anger management. The frontal lobe was where a lot of her damage was, they said, so that she was no longer inhibiting her emotions. They would just burst forth, and there were times when she'd be very frustrated at just trying to feed herself and food falling off the fork, or something upset her about what we were doing, and she was frustrated with the people around. And there were times when she would clear the table of all the plates and food because she was so angry, or give a chair a push, and that was very difficult to deal with. And especially if we tried to have her consequences, to learn from her actions that were inappropriate, and by the time we would mete out that consequence, she did not remember what she had done because her short-term memory was so affected by the injuries. So when we would say you need to sit in your room or get off by yourself, she was asking us, why are you making me do this? Because her memory wasn't affected. But over the years that has returned, and we are doing better with managing her.
Oh no! He's got the camera. Here's a compliment to America.
Wish I'd thought of it.
Okay, I'll get shot that camera. On to a lot of junk. But I think that in the end picture, I will become a lot better of a person than I was before the whole ordeal began.